Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Glory Glory podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Quinn. And joining me today is journalist and broadcaster Callum McFadden. How's it going, Callum?
I'm doing really well, Kyle. As you know, I always love coming on the show and talking all things Manchester United, and what an interesting time to come on and do so.
Yeah, at the moment, overall, it's positive, but the most recent result wasn't very positive. Last night was extremely flat. The crowd were flat. The performance was as well. And that might have something to do with the mitigating circumstances. 90 minutes before kickoff, it was announced that Queen Elizabeth II had passed, and it just created a real somber mood. There wasn't even any interviews. There wasn't any music being played in the stadium. There was no advertisements at halftime or anything. It was all very strange. And United's performance reflected that. Ten Hag made 6 changes, and none of them really worked. Maguire and Lindelof were a disaster. Fred wasn't very good. Casemiro was disappointing. And Ronaldo is starting to look every bit of his 37 and a half years. So, what was your thoughts on the performance then, Callum?
I thought it was very flat, as you say, Kyle. And in terms of individual performances, I was hoping it was the sort of game, although Sociedad are, of course, a good side, that we would see some of the players on the fringes come in and really stake a claim to become first team regulars. But I think the team selection showed that Eric Ten Hag has probably already made his mind up on some players. Luke Shaw, of course, wasn't in the starting 11. I thought that was quite telling. I thought it was quite telling that Christian Eriksen started the match as well, given how much football he's played. And I think we would all say he's played more football than any of us expected, but he has been a standout performer. I just thought last night would have been a good night to give him a rest. I also thought that Martin Dubravka may have made his debut last night. Obviously in goal, he's been brought in as a number 2 goalkeeper. The Europa League, albeit yes, Sociedad are the best side in the group alongside Manchester United. So it's one of those where maybe you want to play a stronger team and hopefully get a positive result there, because if you finish second, you don't automatically progress anymore the way you used to. You will have to play a team that will drop down from the Champions League. So that's an extra 2 games. So United will be desperate to avoid that. But unfortunately, even after one game, I think that's out of their hands, because I do fancy Real Sociedad to win the other games, maybe against United. The last game now is going to be the crucial game, because, as I say, the other sides in the group, the Pneumonia and Sheriff, I fancy United and Real Sociedad to beat both of those sides, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just think with the budget that they've got over the other 2 sides, and it really should be United and Sociedad progressing. So as I say, I was shocked that maybe De Gea started, because I thought if you're bringing in a goalkeeper in Dubravka to be a number 2, then he's going to have to play some minutes. Otherwise, why are you bringing him in? Because Tom Heaton, for me, is a decent goalkeeper. I wouldn't want maybe number 1. But I don't see anything wrong with Tom Heaton being the number 2 goalkeeper. And similarly, Aaron Wan-Bissaka not getting a start, and Diogo Dalot being brought in to start again, for me, emphasises that Eric Ten Hag was sending a message to the dressing room, but also to John Murtagh, Darren Fletcher and others, to say, look, I know I've got some of these players here who you might think are squad players, but I don't really trust them, and I'm going to go with the guys who I know I can already rely on, even in this first 6 weeks as a competitive Manchester United manager.
Yeah, like you say, the next 4 games for both sides are going to be against the minnows from Moldova and Cyprus. You'd expect both teams to get maximum points, and then the group winner will be decided in the final game in San Sebastian. Sociedad obviously having home advantage, so United would need to win that by 2 clear goals, really, I think, to top the group and go straight into the last 16. Because ideally, you want to avoid having 2 more games in the season. But it's an uphill task now for United, because you'd expect Sociedad to have 15 points going into that game, and United on no more than 12. So yeah, you think not winning the first game of the group wouldn't be a disaster, but it is going to cause difficulty for United to top the group now, I'm afraid. Yeah, I expected rotation, but the rotation didn't really work. I thought Maguire was awful. Lindelof at centre back and right back was not very good. Fred in midfield was a huge disappointment, and Casemiro as well. Both of them were guilty of giving the ball away on numerous occasions. And for some strange reason, Casemiro seemed to be better at passing the ball with his head than his feet. I don't know what it is with him. We know what a quality player he is. Maybe it's something to do with the fact that he's just not match fit at the minute. That was his first start for United, and he's only really been playing the odd cameo up until this point. So we'll certainly give him time. But I mean, Fred has played, I don't know how many games he's played for United, but it's quite a lot. And we know he has qualities, especially when United don't have the ball. But when he's in possession, he's just not good enough. And last night proved that again. Alanga, while he's still a very young player, seems to have his limitations. I mean, last night he was brilliant at beating his man, but the final ball just wasn't good enough. He kept finding a Sociedad shirt with the final ball. On Ronaldo, he just doesn't look fit or mobile. His pace is gone. I think Ronaldo, the 28-year-old Ronaldo, would have scored a hat-trick last night with the chances that he had, albeit he had the ball in the back of the net with a brilliant header. And unfortunately, he strayed slightly offside. So what was your thoughts on the individual performances last night, Callum?
As I say, the team selection for me, is, as I said earlier, summed up. I don't think that Eric Ten Hag has full trust in some of the members of the squad for a crucial game, albeit in the Europa League. In terms of the individual starters, I think Harry Maguire is always going to come in for criticism, given his form last season and given the fact United lost last night. If United had won 2 or 3-1 and Ronaldo, as you alluded to, Kyle, scored some of those chances, then maybe we'd be sitting here saying, look, Maguire was steady, if not spectacular, but with the defeat comes added scrutiny, and Harry Maguire is used to that, of course, with United and with England. He's not done anything in that game that suggests to me that he will start over Varane or Martinez anytime soon. With a World Cup coming up, I highly doubt he'll go to a World Cup if he's not playing games. Luke Shaw's in the same bracket. I think for Casemiro, one of the things that intrigues me is whenever he was at Real Madrid, whenever they played Real Sociedad at home, more often than not, that's a pretty comfortable victory, and the tempo of the game, of course, maybe a wee bit different as well. Whereas last night, he probably was shocked because, as I say, when he's at Madrid, that's a game you maybe win 3-4-1 or 4-2 or whatever, whereas last night it was more of a slog. So he's getting up to speed for the Premier League. I thought last night would have suited him more because it was against Spanish opposition, and he's just came to the club from an illustrious spell in Spain, having previously played in Portugal as well, of course. And I was shocked by his performance last night, but it's early days. He is getting up to speed. You have to realise that he's not a native English speaker. As I've just said, he played his career in Portugal and Spain up to date. So it is a culture shock moving to Manchester. It's a lovely place. We've both been, Kyle. We both enjoy it. But weather-wise and culturally, it's very different to the cities of Porto and Madrid. So I'm sure it will take him a wee bit of time to adjust, but I'm sure he will get there. In terms of Fred, I was shocked he was the most advanced of the sort of midfield three that was played last night. I don't think that's the position we'll see him in again anytime soon, unless maybe you draw lower league opposition at home in the FA Cup come January, which has happened before, as we know, the likes of Reading and others in recent years. So unless that happens, I don't think we'll see Fred in that position again. And as I say, I'm shocked to see that. In terms of Cristiano Ronaldo, for me, he really is now a penalty box striker. I don't think we're going to see him running behind. There was a moment against Southampton when he came on as a substitute that Mohamed Salisu was running to try and get a ball with Ronaldo. Ronaldo literally just on the pitch for about 5 minutes, fresh off the bench. Salisu had been playing for about 75 minutes, and there was no real contest in that sprint race. Whereas, as you say, Kyle, maybe 5 years ago, Ronaldo was getting to that ball first, and he's probably scoring a goal for United on that day, never mind last night as well. So his mobility is that of a 37.5-year-old. His physique is incredible. We've all seen the videos on Instagram. They put us all to shame in terms of how he looks and how he trains. But mobility is something that affects every player, whether you're Ronaldo or Teddy Sheringham, who played into his 40s. It affects everyone, and you naturally will slow down. And I interviewed Paul Merson a few months ago, and he said the most frustrating thing when you get older is in your head, you know exactly what you're doing, but your body isn't as fast to react. And before you know it, the chance is away or the pass is away, even though in your head it's on. So as I say, I think for now he'll be a penalty box striker, and that's where the likes of Anthony, Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford, Christian Eriksen, Bruno Fernandes, when Ronaldo plays, will be key, because we've seen some lovely team goals from United so far. Sancho against Leicester was very impressive in terms of how he took the goal. But I don't think we're going to see Ronaldo really score goals like that, because I think he is going to have to be in the penalty box already rather than having to run in behind. So that's going to be an interesting challenge. But overall, we've obviously talked through some individual displays there. But as I say, flat overall. And the occasion, of course, was a strange occasion, obviously following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. And I think that I find, obviously, if anything happens where it's a death of a former player or a nationwide tragedy, maybe such as a terrorist attack, we've seen minute silences and things for such events in the past, and they are sad events. And I always think it can be hard to get the crowd up for a game in the first 15 or 20 minutes after any minute silence, because it is such a poignant moment where a crowd of 75,000 people who are normally rapturous in their applause and their chanting is completely silent. You know, it's a somber atmosphere, and given the circumstances, it is entirely understandable. I always think it's hard to see that verve and intensity. You would see 75,000 were cheering and screaming as they come out the tunnel and they're ready to go. But that's not an excuse for the flat performance for the full 90 minutes. Of course it isn't. And I think, as I say, Erik Ten Hag will have learned a lot about his squad members last night, and he will know that, yes, this Europa League campaign has only begun, but it's going to be hard to win this group with Sociedad having the early advantage.
Yeah, in 2008, at the Manchester derby that was played on the 50th anniversary of the Munich air disaster, United were obviously a brilliant team back then. They won the Champions League and League double that season, but the performance that day was extremely flat, because of the commemoration of the Munich disaster. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying there, that when when there's a death or a tragedy, you know, it affects the performance of the players. And it would have affected Sociedad a lot less, because obviously they're from Spain, and it you know, it doesn't resonate as much with them as it would, you know, the players at Manchester United. But noticeably, what was back last night was some things that we were used to during the Solskjaer era, was De Gea, Maguire, and Lindelof just passing it to each other and going absolutely nowhere. What we've been used to in the previous 4 games was either De Gea launching it long, or the likes of Martinez or Varane carrying the ball out and playing progressive passing. It just showed that these players are just not going to fit into Ten Hag's long-term plans, because they just don't have the ability on the ball. They're just very simplistic about the way they go about their football, and they get caught in possession. They have a lack of pace. They can get bullied, particularly Lindelof. So they're starting to look like players of the past now, aren't they?
Absolutely. I think in terms of Harry Maguire, it reminds me of, and I'm not comparing them for players because Wayne Rooney, of course, is a Manchester United icon, but when Wayne Rooney was at the club, when Jose Mourinho was in charge, there was an atmosphere of, will he, won't he drop him? And the moment Rooney was dropped, he never really got back in the team, and it just seemed like a matter of time before he would move on. And he did at the end of Mourinho's first season, of course, by going back to Everton. So for me, that's the way the Maguire situation is now. Unless Varane or Martinez gets a substantial injury, he's not getting an extended run in this team. He has went from being the captain on the field to being club captain. He still has the respect of, obviously, the club. He still has the respect, I'm sure, of most of his teammates. But if you're not on the field, I don't think you have the same influence in the dressing room. You see that, for instance, with someone like Gary Neville towards the end of his career. He was club captain, but he wasn't on the field an awful lot due to injury. So someone like Rio Ferdinand was seen more as a leader, or Ryan Giggs, who were playing sort of week in, week out, rather than Gary, who was an incredible footballer for United. But yeah, you're right. I think they are starting to look like yesterday's men. I still think Lindelof can be an interesting squad option. But again, similar to Maguire, unless there's a substantial injury to Varane or Martinez or Dalot even, he's not getting an extended run in this team. And in terms of David De Gea, I think you'll see him gradually phased out as of next summer. Whether United go and sign an out-and-out number one, or they bring Dean Henderson back into the fold, I don't quite know. But the days of saying De Gea will play to he's maybe 36, 37 like Van der Sar did at United, I don't think that's realistic anymore, considering how Erik Ten Hag ideally would want to play. You've mentioned the fact that obviously in the Premier League matches, De Gea's been going long. United have been happy to compete for second balls and play percentage football at times. Long term, I don't think that's what Erik Ten Hag wants to do at United, and I think we'll see that change, whether, as I say, it's an established number one or added competition. And I don't mean this disrespectfully to Martin Dubravka, but I don't see him as real competition for De Gea long term. So I would expect, as I say, someone more established to come in and fight for that jersey as of next summer.
Yeah, I think De Gea's been a fantastic servant, but he's not the modern goalkeeper that Ten Hag will ideally want to have in the side, and I think that will be an issue that will be readdressed in the summer, whether that be Dean Henderson or buying a number one goalkeeper. I certainly don't think it's going to be Dubravka. I don't think he's going to be there long term. He wasn't even given a chance last night in a game that we thought he would play. Okay, then I just want to talk about the refereeing issue last night, which has obviously been a big topic. It's referees and VAR is something no football fan really wants to talk about, but at times it's just unavoidable. I've never seen a penalty given for that before, where the ball hits his thigh and then deflects onto his arm. And I thought everybody in the stadium, everybody at home thought VAR will overturn this, but didn't. Today, I found out that in Serie A, if the ball touches your hand at all, they will give a penalty. Apparently, last season, Matthijs de Ligt gave away a penalty for handball 4 games in a row in Serie A, which is ludicrous. And that referee last night was Italian, so that maybe explains the decision. Obviously, the English referees at the weekend had a really bad weekend, and come under a lot of criticism, and rightfully so. But another thing that frustrates me is the different interpretations of the law between different countries. It's supposed to be one game with the same rules, so we need to be operating as one, and not having Italian referees, Spanish referees, and English referees refereeing the games differently. So how did you see it then, Callum? Did it frustrate you?
It deeply frustrated me. I was stunned that it was a penalty kick. It reminded me of the Middlesbrough game in the FA Cup. I was in the press box that night, and Duncan Watmore gets an assist for Matt Crooks for Middlesbrough to score, and the ball just hits his hand and hits his arm. It's clear, and it went. I don't even think it went to VR, or if it did, it wasn't given, of course. And you're scratching your head that night, thinking that's a very obvious error that's not been overturned. That's really strange. Hopefully, we don't see something like that again. And then, as you say, last night, it hits Martinez on the body, then bounces up onto his arm. I don't really see how you can give a penalty for that. It's not deliberate in the slightest. As I say, it hits his body before it hits him. So it was deeply frustrating that it wasn't overturned. I can understand the referee, as you're saying, Kyle. He's obviously Italian, and they maybe have a stricter stance on handball than maybe referees in the Premier League, but you would still expect that to go to VAR, and for VAR to have a good look at it, and maybe even say to the referee, look, you might not overturn your decision, but please go and have a close look at it and really make your mind up. Whereas I just felt last night that it was a case of there was no change in the referee's mind, no matter what angle or whatever you showed him. It was a case of it hit his hand somehow, so I'm giving a penalty. And I think there needs to be more nuance to a decision like that, and hopefully for the rest of this group stage, and even in the Premier League, we don't see decisions like that, because football can be like pinball in the box. The ball can be moving at pace, it can hit off multiple players, and I don't want to see penalties given or goals chalked off for incidents like that, where the player can do nothing but let the ball hit his hand. He can't possibly get out the way at split-second decisions.
Yeah, a couple of seasons ago in the Premier League, a lot of handball penalties were given, and then they changed the rule again because it was just becoming absurd. Anytime the ball touched someone's arm, there was a penalty given. Thankfully, in England have moved away from that, but clearly it seems in Italy they haven't. The ball's going to. Several defenders are going to be in situations where the ball's going to hit their arm or their hand accidentally throughout the 90 minutes. I mean, if we're going to start giving penalties for those, not to use an old cliche, we're going to have like 6 penalties. It's not the way forward. So I'll just do a quick rundown of the player ratings as always, but not as exciting as it usually is. Certainly in the last 4 weeks, but De Gea would just be the average 6 for me. Dallo was 7. He's been the most improved United player this season for sure. Maguire a 3, Lindelof a 3, Malacia a 6, Casemiro a 5, Christian Eriksen a 7, Fred would get a 3 from me, Alanga a 5, Anthony a 5, and Cristiano Ronaldo probably a 4, unfortunately. And Ten Hag would probably only get a 5 as well, because his changes didn't work, and I know rotation was necessary. Well, in the end, probably it wasn't necessary, because as it turned out, we're not going to have a game at the weekend, so he could have played his strongest 11 in that game. But this was going to be a Crystal Palace preview, this show as well, but it turns out that game is off, so we'll make it a bit of a FC Sheriff preview instead. My opinion is that Ten Hag should go with the team that played against Arsenal, against FC Sheriff, more or less, because I want to keep the match rhythm going and keep the momentum going, because it's quite possible we will not have another Premier League game until October against Manchester City. Is that how you would go along with it as well, Callum? Would you pick the same team that played against Arsenal?
I would, yes. I totally agree with your opinion there. I think the only difference he might make is he might give Casemiro another start just to try and give him some more rhythm, because obviously United, although there's no game, I assume will be in training right through until they play Sheriff. I don't see why Erik Ten Hag wouldn't have the players in for training. I wouldn't understand anyway if there was a protocol against that. There isn't, as far as I'm aware. So I think every coach, for instance, Liverpool are going through a tough time at the moment, which we don't often say. I think every coach should be using the next 6 days, 5 days to work with their players day in, day out, because not often at this stage of the season do you get a break where your full team are available. There is, of course, scheduled to be a break at the end of the month, but that break's an international break, and most of the players for the likes of United, Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs and others will be away playing for the respective countries. So I think it's important that the next 5 or 6 days is used by Erik Ten Hag to drill the players in terms of how he wants to play, patterns of play, really emphasise to those squad players that came in and didn't make the difference what it is they need to do to improve, because even though the likes of Maguire, Lindelof, Alanga and a few others weren't great last night, they are going to be required at some point this season, because even if Varane stays fit all season, he's a centre-back, he might get a red card, he might accumulate 6 bookings. Same with Martinez, same with Malacia. So the likes of Maguire, Shaw and co need to be ready to be called upon. So, as I say, I would use the next 5 or 6 days to really drill the players into your way of thinking, get as much practice in as you can with them. And I agree with you in terms of the Arsenal team. Yeah, if that team goes out, or if Casemiro comes in for McTominay, or even Eriksen, I'm happy with that as well, because I think it is important that United keep that match rhythm, as you say. However, I would be intrigued to see if he starts Cristiano Ronaldo, just because if he's benched every single game for this season, you know what it's like. It's going to just eventually United will have a bad result. He's on the bench and there'll be some story, that comes out, you would assume. So he might want to start him just because it's Europa League and it keeps his stats up in terms of how many starts he's had, and that's something maybe in Eric Ten Hag's arsenal when he's dealing with the media, because although the last 4 games have been really good, if United were to have drawn 2 or 3 of those games, you know, where it's like, oh, Ronaldo should go on the field, he always guarantees you a goal, etc., etc.
Well, you would say Ronaldo is bound to get a brace or maybe a hat-trick against a team like SC Sheriff, but then FC Sheriff won at the Bernabeu last season, and they won 3-0 last night, so it might not be, that certain. I actually, Martinez was probably United's best player last night, and he only came on at halftime, being a superb signing. Um, Martinez and Varane have been a revelation together, and want to see that continue. It'll be heartbreaking if we reach the inevitable Varane injury. We know it's probably going to happen at some point this season, and that would mean Maguire coming back into the team. And we seen last night what that means. It'll not only have an impact on United defensively, but offensively as well. So hopefully Varane somehow stays fit for the majority of the season. So Eriksen has definitely been probably the best signing of the summer, and he was on a free. And Dalot probably the most improved player. How impressed have you been with Christian Eriksen so far?
Incredibly impressed. I didn't expect him to start as many games as he has. I thought against Arsenal he was absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed the chat Roy Keane had with him after the game, particularly when he was talking about how fast he was for the 3rd goal, saying, where did that pace come from, Christian? I found that quite funny. And for me, someone who keeps United ticking over, he adds technical ability to the centre of midfield, which United have been crying out for years. How many times on this show, Kyle, over the last few years have we been saying, you know what you're going to get from McTominay and Fred, but it's not elite level midfield. Lots of energy, tackles, enthusiasm, but you need to be able to put your foot in the ball, look forward and spring a pass forward. We've seen that with Eriksen this season. We've seen it with Bruno Fernandes, who looks rejuvenated with Ronaldo no longer being the focal point up front. He's got players who he knows he can play through, who've got the pace to get in behind, as we saw with Marcus Rashford against Arsenal. So incredibly impressed with Christian Eriksen. I think he's bringing the best out of so many players within the team, including the fullbacks and Dalot and Malacia, because they know if they make a run down the channel that Eriksen can find them. Whereas, again, I don't want to be too disrespectful to McTominay and Fred, but I just felt that you're making a run down the channel as a fullback, and how often have we seen Fred or McTominay hit one of those diagonal balls into the channel successfully? Not very often. So I think it's certainly bringing the best out of so many players within the team.
Yeah, it seems as if Eriksen is playing the Frankie de Jong role, which Ten Hag intended for Frankie to play. Someone who's the link player between the defense and the attack. So that's probably why he started Eriksen last night, because he feels that he's crucial to how United play. And if he's not there, then we go a bit stale. And we've seen that in the second half. Our midfield certainly wasn't as progressive. Certainly wasn't as strong in the second half with Eriksen not being there to create. He can not only play progressive passes with his right foot, but also his left foot as well. What an amazing goal that would have been against Arsenal. Where Anthony did the back heel, Dalot crossed it first time, and then Eriksen on the volley with the left foot just went wide of the post. That would have been sensational if that had went in. And I can't wait for Eriksen's first goal. That's the one thing that's been missing from Eriksen so far. He hasn't managed to get on the score sheet yet. He was very unselfish, scoring at the Rashford against Arsenal when he could have taken the shot on himself there. But yeah, overall he's been absolutely amazing so far. And long may it continue. Something else I wanted to talk about was Terrell Malacia. Some people have said that his performances have tailed off a wee bit, but he's been absolutely brilliant as well. I love how he gets close to defenders. He blocks crosses. He's able to make recovery challenges if he loses out. And he's providing all the things that we haven't seen Luke Shaw providing in the last couple of seasons. So how impressed have you been with Terrell Malacia?
Very impressed in the sense that he gives you maximum effort, maximum enthusiasm. And the thing with Luke Shaw is, because of the way Luke Shaw's built, sometimes it looks as if he's not putting in maximum effort when he is. And that's something that people do criticise him for. I think for me, Shaw's far better going forward than he is defensively. We saw that for England at the European Championships as well. Scores a goal in the final, of course. But defensively, I've never been fully convinced with him since the horrible injury under Louis van Gaal, where he seemed to have more electric pace back then. And it's understandable, of course, that he maybe doesn't have the same pace after such a serious injury. But for me, Malacia, as I say, offers pace in both directions. He is still raw. He came from the Eredivisie. He's been playing at Feyenoord, who are, of course, an incredibly historic club, the first Dutch club to win the European Cup. But it's a big jump from the current modern day Feyenoord to Manchester United, even with Manchester United struggles in recent years. So it will take time, but the fact the manager is starting him in every game now shows the faith he has in him. And I don't think many fans, although they're saying his performances may have tailed off slightly, would be screaming for Luke Shaw to come back into this team at the moment. I know I certainly I'm not feeling that way, and that's no disrespect to Luke Shaw. He will have a part to play, but for me, I feel much more comfortable with someone like Malacia in the team for the recovery pace. As you've said, Kyle, that for me is something that's crucial for any modern day fullback. You look at Andrew Robertson at Liverpool. Obviously, I could be biased, I'm Scottish, but for me, very good going forward, but good recovery pace going back the way. Kieran Tierney, of course, another Scot, is another one of that mould as well. At City, they maybe are slightly different in the sense that Walker and Cancelo are pretty much wingers, just given the fact Rodri will drop in to sort of become a back three at times. But again, they've still got recovery pace they can get back. Whereas for me, that's one of Shaw's areas for development as a player. And as I say, it's maybe understandable why he maybe can't improve that because of the injury he's had and the fact he is getting older, just as we all are. So Malacia would be impressive. A lot more to come from him. There will be some games where he will be awful because he's raw. When you're a young player, we saw it with Marcus Rashford, we saw it with Anthony Alanga. They'll have bursts of explosive moments where you think, wow, they're incredible. Then they'll have some games where you go, you were 5 out of 10 today. That was maybe a tough day at the office for you. And I think it's important to realise that that's natural with such a young player, but the managers get full faith in him. And I don't see why he won't continue in the team from what I've seen so far.
Okay, I'm just going to touch on something that I haven't talked about yet on the show, and that is Ten Hag's pragmatism. After the first 2 games, which quite frankly were an absolute humiliation for the club, especially the Brentford game, Ten Hag did something that most people didn't think he would do, and he tweaked his approach. Now, one example is that he clearly asked De Gea to launch the ball long, at least at times anyway, something that we never expected him to do. But you have to play to the player's strengths, and it has worked. He's not. You don't want to get passing the ball around the back because he's not good at his distribution. And we seen last night how United just become stale when Maguire and Lindelof and De Gea are just passing around each other. And we've seen De Gea get caught out at Brentford and trying to pass the ball out to Eriksen, and it led to a Brentford goal. So yeah, I didn't think that Ten Hag would go with the approach of the goalkeeper launching it long. He certainly tweaked his approach. He's playing to the player's strengths. And that's kind of what you have to do because we needed to get points on the board. Is there any other changes that you noticed Ten Hag made? I'm just going in my head now. There was something else I was going to bring up. Clearly, he playing on the counter attack. That's what I was going to say. Like Ten Hag's team associated with possession football, dominating possession. Slow build-up play, and then eventually getting a goal after like 30 passes. We never expected to see the counter-attack goals that Rashford used to get on the Solskjaer, but we were seeing that against Arsenal and Liverpool. Although it's not all completely counter-attack though in those big games. I mean, the first goal against Arsenal, there was a lot of passes in the build-up, but the second goal clearly was a counter-attack, and the third one as well. So yeah, nobody really expected to see Ten Hag use tactics like the goalkeeper launching it long or playing counter-attack football against the bigger teams. But like I say, after the first 2 disasters against Brighton and Brentford, he was under pressure to get points on the board, and he had to do it hook or by crook. So what's your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, he certainly did have to tweak it because if it continued the way it was against Brentford and in Brighton, he wouldn't be in a job for too long, even though it is a rebuild and it's going to take time. Chelsea have shown with Thomas Tuchel that a new regime can very quickly make a decision quickly. And although, of course, the ownership's still the same at United, I think a new regime in terms of coaches can easily be out the door as quickly as they've come in if results are alarming. For me, one of the things that I've been impressed with is the fact that United can attack as a team now. The difference, I would say, between this and Ollie's team was I felt that the counter-attack under Ollie was reliant on certain individuals. You referenced Rashford getting in behind, whereas the goal at Leicester was great in the counter because McTominay played an important role in winning the ball back, albeit it's a second phase of play after that. I thought that was impressive. I think for me, Jadon Sancho works well when he's got numerous players going forward with him, whereas I felt that there was a tendency last season to give him the ball wide and expect him to run in behind and create moments of magic, whereas he isn't the most pacey winger, even though people assumed that maybe that's the sort of role that he would play. If you watched him at Borussia Dortmund, a lot of team goals that he scored in and assisted in, and that's where his strength is. He's a very technical footballer, not the quickest, but not too sluggish either. And the more players going forward at once helps him, and that's something that I've noticed an improvement with. In terms of Anthony, of course, against Arsenal, I was impressed with the way he took his finish. But again, similar to Malacia, I know he's cost £85 million, but he's going to take time to adjust as well. The Eredivisie is not the Premier League. Doesn't mean he can't adapt. Players have in the past, and they've kicked on and been explosive. But he is going to take time, in my opinion, to get up to speed. And although he scored against Arsenal, there were a few times during the game that I was frustrated with him. I think that's going to be natural. He reminds me of Nani a lot, actually. Hopefully he's more good days than bad days, because I felt that Nani on his good days was unplayable, and on his bad days he was very frustrating. So hopefully more good days than not, but definitely encouraging. I agree with you. To see a manager and a coaching staff be able to adapt is something I don't think we've seen enough of at United in recent years. And it's something that certainly will be welcomed, because if you think about the last days of Mourinho, very, very rigid, very pragmatic. Under Ollie, pretty much reliant on the counter-attack in most games. Whenever you were asked to open a team up, you struggled. Under Ralph Rangnick, it was a case of, I'm only here to the summer, I'll try things, I'll change things, maybe tinker a bit too much, whereas Ten Hag seems to be able to strike a balance with the players he's got at his disposal, even if that's not playing to his true ideals. And for me, that's laudable.
Yeah, Anthony, he's a maverick. He's going to be days where he's going to really frustrate us. He's going to have us banging on the table. And other days, he's going to take our breath away with his skill and ability. But hopefully, like you say, that the latter is more often than the former. But that would probably happen with age. Probably this season, he's going to frustrate us a lot. But hopefully, as he gets older, he'll have more good days and bad days. You would obviously, he's still developing, as you say. He has to get used to the Premier League. And we have to give him time with that. But obviously, he's going to, because of his price tag, the media are going to jump on him once he has a bad game. And that's just the way it goes. That's something that you have to live with. When you're a Manchester United player, the scrutiny is intense. Yes, so I'm feeling pretty bad. Despite the defeat last night, I'm definitely feeling a lot happier, a lot more positive about United than I was after the Brentford game. That was an all-time low. At that point, we were discussing on this podcast about when is our next goal going to come from? Where's our next 3 points going to come from? And then we won 4 games in a row, including against Arsenal and Liverpool. And suddenly we're talking about finishing second again. Isn't it? Football is it's crazy, isn't it? Things can just change like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're right. I think people were even talking about relegation after those first 2 games. And then, as you say, 4 games later, people are saying, like Roy Keane on Sky at the weekend, United will definitely be top 4, and I definitely fancy them to finish above Arsenal, whereas that certainly wasn't being said after the first couple of weeks of the season. So it can change quickly, and as good as it's been the last 4 weeks, it could change and revert back to the way it was in those first 2 games. We hope it doesn't. But I think taking it week by week and adapting when necessary is something that Ten Hag will do, and hopefully it will get us the the return to European football's elite competition at the very least come next season.
Yeah, realistically, this season, obviously, we're not going to win the Premier League. That's just fanciful stuff. Unless Ten Hag's just going to do a Ranieri at Leicester and just surprise absolutely everybody and win the Premier League. But when you're up against Man City, who have the best striker in the world, it just seems an impossible task. So realistically, I just want United to finish in the top four and maybe pick up a domestic cup or the Europa League.
Yeah, for me that would be a good season, and it would certainly be progress from what we watched last year under Ollie and Ralph Rangnick.
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of people may have missed last night or may have went under the radar was the debut of Charlie McNeil. It wasn't something that I was expecting last night, but Ten Hag was desperate for a goal, obviously, and he took off Malassi, I think, and brought on McNeil. I would like to see him get maybe more substitute appearances against kind of in the next 4 Europa League games, because like we've seen in the youth games, he's a hell of a talent. Obviously, he's not ready to come in and start for Manchester United in the Premier League at the moment, but playing in the Europa League against Moldovan and Cypriot opposition would be good for his development, and if he could get a couple of goals there, that would be fantastic.
It would be, and he's certainly someone who catches the eye whenever you watch the under-23s play, whether that be in the EFL trophy or whether that be in the reserve league as well. I know he is highly regarded at the club. Obviously, I spoke to Neil Wood and Neil Ryan when they were at the club before they departed in the summer for Salford and the FA respectively, and they talked about him being someone who was one to watch. Whether he would go out on loan or stay and develop with the 23s in the first team was unknown at the time. But it seems like that is going to be the way forward for this season until January at the least. And I think he is a player who can make an impact in the years to come. But again, with any young player, it needs to be tempered and he needs to be introduced gradually. Because although back when Marcus Rashford came in, it was out the blue, it's unrealistic to expect that from all young players, and they'll have to handle them carefully. But with the Eric Ten Hag and, of course, someone like Steve McLaren on his staff, I mean, they know that better than anyone, given the fact that they've got a background in youth development. Steve McLaren, of course, was an assistant before he entered management, and obviously in Eric Ten Hag, he's managed Bayern Munich's B-side, so they certainly know how to handle young players, and I think they'll be cautious with Charlie McNeil, but he will get more opportunities as well.
Yeah, and the same will apply to Zidane, Iqbal and Garnacho as well. It seems as if Ten Hag has taken a shine into Garnacho, similar to where Rangnick took a shine into Elanga. Although Elanga played a lot more football than what Garnacho has done so far, but Garnacho has been on the bench, I think, in every single game. He played a lot. He got minutes in pre-season. Of course, I think he's only recently turned 18, so very, very young player. But clearly, Ten Hag feels he's got the ability to be part of United's first team squad.
He does, in terms of Zidane Iqbal. I know that he is incredibly highly rated by the manager. I know that he's someone who maybe could have went loan in the summer. There certainly was interest in him, but Eric Ten Hag made it clear he wanted to keep him around the first team picture. Whereas if you look at someone like James Garner, it was decided that this would be the best summer to cash in, because if he was loaned out again, there would be no guarantee that his value would rise. So it's certainly one to watch in terms of Zidane Iqbal, as well as, of course, Garnacho and Charlie McNeil, because there is a reason why they stayed in around the first team picture this season, and that's because Eric Ten Hag and his coaching staff certainly think that in the next couple of seasons they can make an impact more regularly than maybe they will this season, but they're around the picture for a reason.
A lot of fans were left scratching their heads when they seen James Garner depart the club on a permanent basis, after not really getting a chance at Old Trafford, and after he impressed so well at Nottingham Forest. Do you think the manager really rates Zidane Iqbal? Obviously, like you said, do you think that's part of the reason why Ten Hag allowed the club to cash in on James Garner?
I think in terms of James Garner, the fact he was injured at the start of this pre-season, I don't think has helped him. I think if he was fully fit and ready to come in and play in the first few games from the start, then maybe there could have been a different story if he caught the eye when he was given an opportunity. But I think that was always a difficult one and particularly in a summer when United have more than doubled their expected net spend, they had to raise money to come back in. We all know the way the club operates, and that the ownership aren't going to be putting a lot of their own money, or if, let's be honest, any of their own money in to providing these transfers. So money was going to have to come back in somewhere. James Garner was seen as someone that a fee could come in for now. There's obviously add-ons which will continue to rise. I believe there's a sell-on clause as well. So United feel that they're well covered there in terms of getting money back from him and maybe getting more value that way than putting him into the first team this season, where if you put him in and he doesn't adapt and he doesn't play well, is anyone really going to be battering the door down next summer to sign him permanently? You'd be probably looking at another loan maybe to the Championship, which I don't think United wanted to do given the fact he was there last season with Forest. I was stunned, to be honest with you, that Forest didn't sign him. I really was. He certainly loved these 18 months there at the club under Chris Hughton and then, of course, Steve Cooper. So I was stunned they didn't push harder at the start of the summer. But as I say, Ten Hag was assessing him. I don't think the injury and knock that he had helped. But good luck to the lad. He certainly loves Manchester United. He's certainly a player that many within the club thought would play in the first team. There was surprise that he was allowed to leave the club from some people. But that's football. Managers and coaches sometimes have different opinions to you or I, or maybe even some people within academies or whatever it may be at clubs. So it was a decision the managers made. He certainly believes it's the right decision. I suppose bringing in a player of Casemiro's quality and Christian Eriksen's quality makes him believe that he needs ready-made players, and he didn't quite feel that James Garner was at that level yet, but he could turn into it. And let's hope we've not got another Pogba situation on our hands, Kyle, where he leaves cheap and you buy him back for an expensive fee in the future.
Yeah, what happens if he's sensational at Goodison Park? Is that not going to be an absolute humiliation to Manchester United? Of course, like you said, there's always the possibility United could buy him back. It just would be the most typical United thing ever to let a player go for a minimal fee and then buy him back for something like 60 or 70 million.
The frustration for me on that, and this is just a personal frustration, is one thing Manchester City do incredibly well, Real Madrid are like this as well, is to put buybacks in some of the young players. Look at Reguilon, who obviously hasn't worked out at Tottenham. He's been back for a loan spell, I believe, to Spain. But they put a buyback in case if he went to Tottenham and became a superstar left back, Madrid would buy him back and either sell him on for a higher fee or they would use him in their first team. City are doing that with Lavia, who's obviously at Southampton. They've done it in the past with some other young players as well. And for me, that's something United could get a wee bit better at, because there's nothing wrong with putting a buyback in and going, look, you weren't ready at 21, but at 24, you look ready, we'll take you back now. And that's something I would like to have seen in that deal, but it's not happened.
Yeah, well, hopefully his United career isn't over and he plays really well at Everton, and then United buy him back, and then he's into our midfield, our next midfield that wins the Premier League. Hopefully he's part of it. But I suppose he's only one man, really. It doesn't really matter who's part of it, as long as we're back being a successful club again and winning trophies. Because I understand that we went 9 years without winning a trophy between 1968 and 1977. We're now at 5 and counting. We want to avoid that situation again and get another trophy on the board as soon as possible, don't we?
It certainly needs to happen. This season, I don't think the pressure will come from inside the club to get a trophy on the board, from the fan base, from people like yourself and I and many others. Yes, a trophy would be an incredible start to the Eric Ten Hag era, but I think next season's where that expectation will come. And I'm not saying that will be Premier League, because I think, again, we have to be realistic. Man City have signed Erling Haaland this summer. Who's to say they won't go and sign Jude Bellingham or someone else of an incredible stature next summer, and some of the other sides similarly as well. So it's important that United get closer. They bridge the gap. It was far too big last season. And a domestic cup would be an incredible start to the Eric Ten Hag era, but serious progress this season's a minimal.
Okay, guys, please subscribe to the podcast, get your comments down below, and give us a wee like in the video if you're watching on YouTube. And Callum, it's been an absolute pleasure as always to have you on the show.
I always love coming on the show, always love talking United. What I like about this show compared to some of the other shows that you see online is the fact that it's very well measured. You don't just say things for effect or for clickbait. And for me, that's the way any quality show is. So always glad to come on the show and hopefully be back again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the comment, and we'll definitely have you on again later in the season.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, see you later.
See you later.